He stood at the edge of Niagara Falls alone, soaked and shaking, staring into the roar, like he was waiting for someone who'd promised to return but never did. It tied to his leg, a ragged shoelace biting into raw skin. In his mouth, a torn piece of child's pajamas. What was he guarding? Why had he waited for so long? What we discovered next will stay with you forever. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe, like the video, and tell us in the comments where are you watching from. Now let's jump into the story. The morning fog hugged Niagara Gorge like a quiet ghost, muffling the famous roar. Park Ranger Jude Hartley walked the wet path alone, pulling his coat tight. The overlook seemed empty until he spotted a small dark shape near the rail, perfectly still against the mist. Jude paused. After years on patrol, he had met daredevil tourists and runaway dogs, but never anything this frozen. Drawing closer, he saw a German shepherd puppy, maybe 5 months old, paws planted at the very edge where cold spray turned into fine rain. The pup stared ahead, ears up, as if waiting for a miracle to rise from the churning water below. The ranger's first instinct was to call softly, but the animal's silence felt sacred. Instead, he watched. The puppy's fur was mostly ink black, yet a strip of gray ran under the belly like silver moonlight. The tail barely twitched. In its mouth hung a narrow strip of fabric, sky blue with faint white stars, fluttering each time the wind shifted. Jude's eyes narrowed. Pajama cloth. Maybe from a child? Only when the pup shifted weight did Jude spot the darker detail. A bootlace dirty tan, frayed at the ends, tied above the right front paw. The knot had sunk into swollen flesh, a grim bracelet. Each time the puppy placed weight on that leg, a tremor passed through the small body, but no sound escaped. The muzzle, the obedience of that silence, cut deeper than a whine. Jude crouched low, keeping his voice gentle. "Easy there, little one," he whispered, though the roar behind him swallowed every syllable. Still, the pup flicked one ear back, sensing the vibration if not the words. It did not turn. It would not leave its post. Jude felt an ache bloom behind his ribs, part sympathy, part confusion. He gauged the distance. 5 steps lay between him and the animal, yet it felt like a canyon. Quick movements might startle the pup, send it bolting into brush or worse, toward the slick rocks behind the rail. Patience, he told himself. Let the story unfold. So he lowered himself onto the damp gravel, boots flat, arms relaxed across his knees, and simply watched the falls with the dog. Minutes crawled by. Gulls screamed overhead, water thundered, and mist collected on Jude's eyelashes. Still the pair shared the vigil. When the breeze shifted, Jude smelled damp fur and something. Sweeter child's soap, maybe. He followed the puppy's rigid gaze to the boiling cauldron below. The ranger wondered what promise held that young heart captive. Someone told it to wait, he decided, and it still believed a distant engine rumble warned of an approaching tour bus. Jude had a narrow window before crowds poured in. He slid one boot an inch forward, then another. The puppy's amber eyes flicked sideways, measuring him. Jude stopped, raising both palms. "All right, partner, you're in charge." The pup blinked but did not retreat. Small victory. Yet a bus horn made both of them jump. Suddenly the pup wheeled, limping toward the trees with surprising speed. Jude rose and followed, careful not to run. Branches dripped cold water onto his head as he slipped from paved trail into hushed woodland. The puppy glanced back once, eyes bright but not panicked, as though inviting him to see something. Boots sank softly into the mulch until the forest swallowed the sound of the falls. Under a cluster of pines, the pup stopped beside a shallow hollow lined with brown needles. Here the air smelled of earth rather than river. The puppy lowered the blue fabric onto the ground like an offering, then stepped aside, chest heaving. Jude took in the scene: crushed crackers, torn leaflets from a park map, and a one-eyed plush otter, caked but clearly loved. All child-sized relics orphaned. Jude knelt, heart hammering. The bootlace wound was angry and wet. Infection would come soon. Still, the pup stood like a guard beside the treasures. Jude took a piece of beef jerky from his pocket and set it on the pine needles. The pup sniffed, then nudged the treat back toward him, as if saying, "Feed yourself, I am on duty." That gesture broke Jude's composure. His throat tightened. Beyond the pines he heard the bus doors hiss. Time was up. Oh, very. Slowly he slid off his jacket and laid it beside the pup, making a small tent against the drizzle. "I'll get help," he whispered. The puppy watched, unblinking, but when Jude reached for his radio, it did not flee. A fragile trust had started. Jude pressed the call button, eyes never leaving the silent watcher who had waited too long on the cliff. In the distance, sirens began to echo, signaling that help was finally on the way. Sirens sliced through the quiet woods, growing louder with each echo. Jude knelt beside the wounded puppy, now tucked beneath his jacket like a fragile secret. Mist still drifted between the trees, but the dog Coda, Jude decided he would call him, kept his eyes fixed on the ranger, as if memorizing the face that had stayed. Jude stroked the damp fur once, whispering, "Help is coming, buddy." The pup did not flinch, only let out a tired breath that seemed older than his months. A white rescue van crunched over gravel and stopped beyond the pines. Veterinarian Nina Sorrell stepped out first, ponytail escaping her wool cap. Behind her came Malik Wells, the clinic's driver, tall and soft-spoken. Nina carried a red medical kit in one hand and a calm smile in the other. She approached slowly, dropping into a crouch a few feet away. "That's our patient?" she asked, voice low. Jude nodded, explaining about the shoelace and the blue cloth. Nina's eyes turned gentle, but focused. She could already see the swelling. Malik unfolded a lightweight stretcher lined with gray fleece. He laid it on the ground, then joined Jude at the pup's side. Nina pulled gloves over her hands, speaking in soft rhythm. "Hey there, little traveler. We're going to make that leg feel better." She slid closer until she could study the knot. The shoelace was caked with mud and dried blood, tightened hard as wire. Nina winced. "This has to come off now." Malik steadied the dog's shoulders, while Jude held the uninjured paw. Coda tensed, but did not bite. As though some inner compass told him resistance was wasted energy, Nina took out blunt-tipped scissors, easing a finger under the lace. The smallest snip released the strangling loop. Crimson drops welled up. Coda whimpered once, then licked Nina's wrist as if apologizing for the trouble. Nina cleaned the wound with antiseptic, wrapped soft gauze around the leg, and added a foam splint. "Infection starting," she said, tying the final knot, "but we're right on time." Jude exhaled a breath he did not know he was holding. They coaxed Coda onto the stretcher. Malik lifted the head end, Jude the tail, and together they carried him to the van. Nina climbed inside first, making a nest from towels and sliding the plush otter beside the pup. Jude set the blue cloth near Coda's nose. The puppy sighed, rested his chin on the frayed edge, and finally closed his eyes. The van door shut. With a soft click, sealing the fragile hope inside, the ride to Lakeside Animal Clinic took 15 minutes. Nina's gentle hum filled the space while the van heater fought the cold. Jude sat opposite Coda, counting each rise and fall of the pup's chest. At the clinic, a tech scanned for a microchip nothing. X-rays showed no broken bones, but the leg needed antibiotics fast. Nina cleaned the wound again, noting how close the tissue had come to turning septic. "Another day, and he might have lost it," she murmured. Jude's stomach tightened. While Nina prepared medication, Jude stepped into the hallway, the blue pajama scrap clutched in his hand. The fabric felt soft, small enough for a child's sleeve. Stars on faded sky blue suggested bedtime stories and gentle good night's things that should never end beside a waterfall in winter. Jude snapped a photo of the cloth with his phone and sent it to a park warden friend who monitored missing person reports. No child alerts matched. Restless, Jude sat in the clinic lobby scrolling social media, using keywords like German Shepherd, Niagara, and lost puppy. After several empty results, a public post on a local adventure group caught his eye. A smiling couple and a young boy holding a much smaller version of Coda. The caption read, "First trip with our new pup. Astro, can't wait to explore Goat Island tomorrow." The timestamp. 3 days ago, Jude's pulse quickened. He dug deeper, scrolling through comments until one blunt reply made his blood run cold. "We ditched him. He couldn't keep up. He'll manage, dogs are tough." Likes and emojis followed, half in jest, half in disbelief. Jude's hands trembled, the phone screen blurred. He strode back to the exam room where Nina was adjusting a fluid line. "You need to see this," he said, showing her the post. Nina's eyes hardened. "They left him on purpose?" Jude nodded, jaw tight. Malik, who had been cleaning the stretcher, cursed under his breath. "Who does that to a baby?" Nina smoothed Coda's ears. The pup lay drowsy on a warm blanket, plush otter under his paw. "Waited because they told him to," she said. Quietly, "That's loyalty no one deserved." Jude's chest burned with anger and pity bound together in one knot. But the vet's next words steadied him. "We'll document everything. The way they get him back if they try." Night settled over the clinic windows, turning them into dark mirrors. Jude refused to leave, pulling a chair beside the kennel where Coda now dozed. Nina wrote treatment notes. Malik brewed coffee strong enough to keep them all alert. The hallway smelled of disinfectant and quiet resolve. At 10:30, Jude's phone buzzed. The park warden messaged. Same family reported lost pup, but details don't add up. They claim a leash snapped, no mention of shoelace or injury. Jude looked at Coda, who twitched in sleep, thought of the pup standing at the cliff, guarding a child's scrap like holy cloth. The truth, Jude realized, would be heavier than any waterfall roar, but they would carry it together. The clinic lights dimmed to night mode. Nina covered Coda with a fleece throw, then placed a small sign on the kennel door. "Patient under. Protective hold." Jude settled into the chair, determined to stay until morning. Above the kennel, an IV bag glowed softly, drop by drop, feeding life into the tiny traveler. Outside the window, the river kept rushing toward the falls, unstoppable. Inside, time slowed around a single promise. Coda would never stand alone on a cliff again. Coda didn't sleep much in the nights that followed, even after the medicine started to work, and the swelling on his leg began to ease. He lay awake in the corner of his kennel, eyes wide and ears alert. The plush otter stayed tucked beneath his chest, as if guarding him from the nightmares that circled just out of reach. Jude returned to the clinic each evening after work, never saying much, just sitting close, letting Coda see that someone was still there. Sometimes Jude brought a sandwich and tore off pieces for Coda. The pup rarely ate them, but once he nudged a bit of turkey toward the otter instead, like he thought his tiny friend needed it more. That moment stayed with Jude long after he left each night. There was something in that quiet kindness that hit harder than a bark or a cry ever could. On the fourth night, Jude arrived to find Nina waiting at the clinic door. Her face looked tired, her voice even more so. "He started howling," she said. "Not loud, not angry, just sad. It's like he's calling for someone." Jude followed her down the hallway, heart already heavy. Sure enough, from behind the quiet room door came a low, drawn-out sound, not quite a whimper, not quite a cry. A sound that carried old pain, like the pup was remembering something he couldn't understand but couldn't let go. Coda was curled in the corner of the room, the otter between his paws, his eyes staring straight through the wall. He didn't lift his head when Jude walked in. Didn't stop howling either. Jude dropped to the floor beside the kennel and opened the door slowly. Coda didn't move, didn't flinch. Just kept calling out that soft, broken sound. Jude crawled inside and sat down next to him, not caring that the floor was cold or that his back would ache later. He placed a hand gently on Coda's back, and the pup shivered once. Hardin then pressed himself against Jude's side like something inside him had finally cracked. "It's okay," Jude whispered. "You don't have to call for them." Anymore, Coda buried his face under Jude's arm and let go. His body sagged, the howling stopped, and for the first time since being rescued, he fell asleep. Jude sat still, one hand resting lightly over the pup's ribs, feeling each slow breath as it calmed. Neither of them moved for a long time. The next morning, Jude made a call to his supervisor. "I need some time off," he said simply. "What?" "Needs me more than the trail does." The change in Coda was small at first. Just a flicker of recognition when Jude walked in. His ears didn't flatten anymore. His tail gave a tiny thump now and then. He still didn't like loud noises or sudden movements, but he started sitting closer to Jude. Sometimes he even let his paw rest on Jude's boot while he lay on the floor. Nina noticed it too. "He trusts you," she said softly. "He didn't even growl once when you came in last night." One afternoon, Jude walked into the clinic to find Nina waiting again, this time with her lips pressed into a tight line. "They showed up," she said. "The family? They're here. They want him back." The words punched Jude right in the chest. He walked into the lobby and saw them. A woman in designer sunglasses, holding a latte. A man looking annoyed, checking his phone. And a boy with downcast eyes holding a brand new stuffed bear, tags still on. Coda was in the quiet room, unaware. "They didn't call?" Jude asked. Nina shook her head, just walked in like nothing happened. The shelter manager, Lara, stood nearby. "We can't make the decision for him," she said gently. "He has to choose." They agreed to bring the family into the room, but Jude stood between them and Coda as they entered. "Astro," the woman cried, crouching with open arms. "Come here, sweetie." Dada stood slowly, not toward her, not toward anyone. Just stood shaking slightly, his eyes darting between faces. Then the man spoke. "Come on, dog, don't be weird. We came back." At the sound of his voice, Coda backed up and pressed into Jude's leg. He didn't bark, didn't growl, just trembled. Jude placed a steady hand on the pup's shoulder. The boy stepped forward quietly. "Astro," he whispered, "I told them not to leave you." Coda let out a soft, low growl. Not angry, just hurt. A sound of betrayal. He looked between the boy and Jude, confused, as if weighing memories against the present. Jude crouched. Beside him, "It's your choice," he whispered. "No leashes, no commands. You choose." Coda stepped forward, one pace, then stopped. He turned and pressed his head into Jude's chest and sat. The woman blinked. "He doesn't remember us." Jude stood slowly, calm but firm. "He remembers." "That's the problem," the man huffed. "We raised him." "No," Jude said. "You left him, and he learned who he can trust." The couple turned and left, the boy dragging the bear behind. Him silent. Only after the door clicked shut did Coda exhale and let his tail move just once. A quiet sign, not a celebration, just relief. That night, Coda followed Jude everywhere. Into the kitchen, the hall, even the bathroom, like he was making sure he wouldn't be left behind again. When Jude sat on the couch, Coda climbed right up, not beside him, but on top of him, curled up like a child too tired to stay brave. Jude didn't say anything. He just held the pup and let the warmth between them say everything that needed to be said. The otter was tucked between them, as always, safe, like Coda finally was. Jude woke before dawn, startled by the soft weight of Coda's head on his pillow. Pale blue light slid through the window, catching on the new brass tag at the pup's collar. Jude rubbed his eyes, then traced the engraved words with one finger. Chosen, not abandoned. Coda's tail brushed the blanket, just a lazy sweep, as if he already knew today mattered. 2 weeks had passed since the showdown at the clinic. In that short time, every routine in Jude's life had bent to fit Coda's slow rhythm. Sunrise walks replaced late morning coffee. The old radio stayed off because static made Coda flinch. Jude discovered that soft humming worked better than words when the pup froze at sudden shadows. Little by little, the quiet house began to feel like a place where both of them belonged. Paperwork moved faster than Jude expected, Nina documented. Every wound and recovery note. Malik took photos of the cliff site. Lara gathered witness statements. The family never returned, though a lawyer's letter arrived, thin and polite, hinting at retrieval of personal property. Jude answered with a packet thicker than a winter quilt, vet reports, behavioral logs, and a simple handwritten page, titled Intent to Adopt. On a bright Tuesday, Jude and Coda waited outside a modest brick courthouse. Birds perched on the railing, heads tilted, listening to the hush between man and dog. Coda leaned against Jude's leg, chestnut eyes. scanning doors like he half expected someone to drag him away again. Jude rested one steady hand on the pup's shoulder. "We're just here for a signature," he said softly. Coda responded with a slow blink, the trust in that look filling Jude with steady fire. Inside, the hearing lasted 12 minutes. Judge, a gray-haired woman with kind but certain eyes, reviewed the files. She asked Jude if he understood the responsibility of ownership. He answered without hesitation. She asked whether anyone contested. The gavel tapped wood once quiet, final in, that was it. Coda lifted his head at the sound. Jude thought it felt like the river's roar reduced to a single heartbeat. They celebrated with a walk instead of cake. No. Jude drove to the park entrance. Before the tour buses lined up, before the souvenir shops unlatched their doors, the air smelled of wet stone and cold pine. Coda stood in the truck bed, ears pricked, nose tasting every current of scent rushing past. He balanced well now. The limp was a small hitch, nothing more. Jude parked near Goat Island and opened the door. Coda hopped down, landing lightly on strong legs that once shook under pain. They took the same trail that led to Prospect Point, boots and paws crunching over frost-tipped leaves. The roar of Niagara grew until conversation felt pointless. But words weren't needed. Jude watched Coda's tail raised, relaxed, a banner of quiet courage. The cliff edge appeared, the rail, still wet with mist. Coda paused. For a breath, Jude feared memories might drag the pup into dread, but Coda simply sniffed the air. Then, with calm purpose, he set the plush otter on the ground beside the rail. Jude knelt. "It's like you're making an offering," he murmured. Coda glanced up, eyelids half closed, content. The river's thunder surrounded them, yet the space between felt hushed, sacred. Jude unhooked Coda's collar and slid the new brass tag around so it caught the weak winter sun. "This is your spot," he said. "Your story began here, but it doesn't have to end here." Coda pressed his nose into Jude's palm, then turned to face the falls once more. Spray danced like silver dust in the light. For the first time, Jude noticed how small the dog looked against such power, yet how solid he stood, chest out, feet planted. A pup no longer waiting for ghosts, only listening to the water and deciding where to go next.